All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with section 1.8, complex numbers. Okay, so complex numbers is something they'll use in order to solve for negative radicals. Okay, so it's not a real number, it's an imaginary number. And so something like, everybody could do the square root of 9. Everybody knows that that's 3, right? But what about the square root of negative 9? Okay, you can't do it, okay, but you could pull out the square root of negative 1 and the square root of 9. Negative 1 times 9 is square root of negative 9, right? The square root of negative 9 is 3, we knew that. But what's the square root of negative 1? Square root of negative 1 is actually I, okay? So the square root of negative 9 is actually 3i. Okay, square root of 16 is 4. Square root of negative 16, 4i. Square root of 25, 5. Square root of negative 25, 5i. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Square root of negative 49, square root of, that's the breakdown of square root of negative 1, square root of 49. Square root of 49 is 7. Square root of negative 1 is I. 7i. But also based on that, if I is equal to the square root of negative 1, what is I squared? Well, we would just square this side. Two things would cancel off. And it'd be negative 1. Those two things you have to remember. Okay. So we go ahead and keep going. Square root of negative 8 times the square root of negative 2. Okay, so we can combine those. Square root of negative 8 times square root of negative 2, so that'd be negative 8 times negative 2, which is 16. And the square root of 16 is 4. Okay, and then the last one is square root of negative 12. You're going to have to be able to simplify these radicals. Okay, and again, by simplifying means pull out the perfect square. And again, what perfect square is like 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4. Anything you can square root. I can square root 9 because it's 3. I can square root 16. Okay, I know what these are. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 25 is 5. Okay, the square root of 36 is 6. These are the perfect square roots. Okay, again, square root of 9, square root of 4, square root of 1. Okay, I know those. So which one goes into 12? Which one goes into negative 12? Well, it has to go into it evenly, and so it's 4. Okay. Also, I'm going to pull out the square root of negative 1, and then I square root 12. Now we do square root of what perfect square goes in there? 4 does. How many times? 3. And remember, I still have the square root of negative 1, which is I. Square root of 4 is 2, and then square root of 3. So you should write this in order. 2i radical 3. That's your answer. You'll have several problems like that. And then once you do that, now they're wanting you to go ahead and can we factor? Can we distribute? Can we FOIL i's? Okay, can we just add i's? Things like that. And so that's what they're going to try to get to next. You'll have to FOIL a lot with the i's. Okay, so get used to how it works. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times I is 2i. Negative 3i times 4 is negative 12i. And negative 3i times I is negative 3i squared. Okay. Condense what you can. So 8, 2i, and negative 12i would be negative 10i. But what is I squared? I squared is equal to negative 1. So this goes to negative 1. And negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. Combine those, so that'd be 11 minus 10. That's your answer. Okay. All right, same thing here. Okay, there's a plus in between. So we don't even need parentheses. We're not going to FOIL these things. I squared goes to -1. So that'd be -11 minus 6i plus 5 plus 4i. Combine what you can. -11 and 5 is -6. -6i and 4i is -2i. And that's your answer. Same thing here. I don't see any I squareds. There's a plus in between. If it was a minus, you'd go ahead and distribute it to both, but it's not. And so 18 and 4 is 22. 8i and -15i is -7i. And that's your answer. Okay, so those aren't bad. The last two is where you have to simplify. And what it does not want, you cannot have an I in the denominator. Okay, so we got to be able to get the I out. And in order to do that, you're going to multiply by the conjugate. Conjugate. And what that means is if it was 1 plus 3i, the conjugate is 1 minus 3i. Or if it's 7 plus I, the conjugate is 7 minus I. Okay. And if you factored these two things or FOILed these two things together, it would get rid of the I completely. That's the purpose of this. Okay. So what do I have to multiply to get rid of the bottom? The conjugate. So if it's 1 plus 3i, I'd have to multiply the top by 1 minus 3i and the bottom. Okay. Let's do the top first. So 10 times 1 is 10. 10 times -3i is -30i. Divided by. And now let's do the bottom. Okay. And so it's exactly like what we did here. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times -3i is -3i. Positive 3i times 1 is positive 3i. And notice how those are going to cross off. And then 3i times -3i is -9i squared, which I squared goes to -1. So again, let's write up the top. 10 minus 30i divided by, those cancel. Minus 9 times -1 is plus 9, so it's just 1. Those are gone. Plus 9, which is 10. So it'd be 10 minus 30i over 10. And notice how you can divide both of them by 10. So 10 divided by 10 is 1. -30 divided by 10 is minus 3i. So that's your simplified answer. Okay. And the last one works out the exact same way. Okay. How do I get rid of the bottom? The top doesn't matter. You can have an I in the top. The bottom is what matters. Can't have an I down there. So instead of 7 plus I, we're going to multiply the top by 7 minus I, the conjugate. We're going to distribute the top, distribute the bottom. Okay, so there's just a little bit more work doing the top. 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times -I is -2i. I times 7 is 7i. I times -I is -I squared, which goes to -1, which would be 14 plus 5i, because 7i minus 2i. And minus and minus makes plus 1, which then equals 14 plus 1 is 15 plus 5i. That's the top. Okay. 15 plus 5i. Now let's do the bottom. 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times -I is -7i. I times 7 is 7i. Notice those will cross off. And I times -I is -I squared. That goes to -1. Those cross off. 49 minus a -1. So that'd be 49 plus 1, 50. So the bottom is 50. And notice, what can I multiply or divide everything by? 15, 5, and 50, I can divide by 5. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 50 divided by 5 is 10. And there's my simplified version of that. Okay. So that's section 1.8. Again, let me know if you have any questions. And we'll see you again next week then.